I have made multiple critical errors. The first was deciding to make 30 prop weapons in 30 days for the Sword Temper Art Challenge. The second was actually doing it. A task I cataloged in a series of shorts that did a little good, not gonna lie. This video serves as both a collection of all those shorts for those who prefer the better video format, plus the third of my aforementioned critical errors, an epilogue for this whole mistake-ridden journey. So even if you've seen every short already, 1, thank you very much, 2, the epilogue is marked in the video chapters, please check it out, I think you're gonna like it, and this video has taken over 2 months to make, please, it really means a lot to me. But enough pathetic begging, please sit back and appreciate how much improvement can happen over just 30 days. I'm making a Gladius out of foam, tracing and cutting out the pieces, and cutting a slot through the middle one for the support rod. Then after gluing the handle together, I realized the rod was super crooked and I had to trim it. And then I realized the blade wasn't going up. I tried to be clever and use 2 pieces bent around the support. It doesn't matter, it didn't work. Had to go back and do what I should have done in the first place and make a 3rd blade piece before finally getting to glue up the full sword and trim it into the final, oh god damn it. Well, I'm ignoring that, and I recommend you do the same. After I did everything I could with a knife, I moved on to the Dremel for the final shaping, adding a little bulk to the pommel on the way. But with the sword body finally done, I could seal it up with some plastic if I had time, which I don't. So instead, I went straight to painting with some silver spray paint, and adding the little nub I cut off before. Then painting the gold bits gold, the red bits red, and finally having a finished Gladius. The rough as hell Gladius, but given that it had 2 different project ending issues, I'm counting this as a win. Let's see if I can keep this very rickety train rolling. I was prompted to make a rose bow by Cosmo from the Discord and was immediately struck with the idea for a rose-themed sword breaker instead. With the tines being the thorns, and oh my god, fuck these tines! I made them too thin and fragile based on real sword breakers, and lesson fucking learned, make prop weapons to prop proportions, because I tried everything to make these tines. From fresh blades to trying to drill through the foam with the Dremel, I ended up having to carve all the tines off of the blade and find a replacement, which ended up being these little cardboard pyramids. And after adding a guard and pommel made of petals and painting the whole thing to look like a rose, it was a pretty good proof of concept at least, which is more than good enough to count as a win. And I do really fuck with the concept it's proving, so I'll definitely be trying this one again. I built Marine's Razor from Skyrim, specifically because I figured I'd be able to get that cool inset on the blade and layered guard with layers of thin foam, which worked really well. Though leaving the pieces large so I could trim them down to fit was a mistake. These looks are just too small for that. Though hand sanding worked way better than I thought it did when I tested it, so adding that to my toolbox. But while the rough shape was, well, rough, some final cleanup and color really pulled it together, especially when I hold it so you can't see the handle. I'm honestly really happy with how this one came out, and I'm excited that I can feel myself improving as I do this challenge. Though, I'm even more excited I've managed to avoid failing any so far. I made Faust Scalpel from Guilty Gear. Oh, this is gonna be a problem. Making this giant thing took, honestly, not that much foam. Mostly because I was able to strip the sheets to the absolute bone for the million pieces I needed. With those, I first glued up each third of the scalpel, I made it with 3 layers to get the thickness I needed, one of which I cut a massive hole into, which not only made it even floppier than it already was, but also let me glue in a support rod to make it stop doing that. Then all I had to do was glue on the other pieces, spend a short eternity sanding the final thing down with a Dremel, god I need a belt sander, and to pour most of a can of silver spray paint on it to call it done. And I am super happy with how it came out. But tell me what you think, and if you like it, check out the other videos I've made so far. King Campbell on Discord asked for an Executioner sword, and since those things are fucking sick, I am happy to oblige. The fact that this is specifically a museum piece is both good and bad for me. It's good because I know the exact dimensions of the sword, and since the blade's a big rectangle, that makes layout super easy. The bad is that what he was actually asking for was the inscription on the blade, which has been a problem for me in the past. But thankfully, some very helpful commenters have suggested a wood burning tool, which was exactly what I needed to make this sword. Okay, I may need some practice with it, but the point is, once I get that practice, this is going to work great. I made the Night Shield from Breath of the Wild, a build so big it started by straight up gluing 2 whole sheets together, before doing the most layout possibly ever. I didn't want to print and prep a stencil for something this big, so I instead took the obviously much simpler approach of measuring the distance between different widths of the shield so I could map out how it tapered as it. Are you getting any of this? No? Good, we're moving on. I then added the border, which was so much more annoying than it had any right to be, but thankfully after that, I could get to cutting the shield in half. or more accurately cutting a groove in the back of it, which I could then glue back together to add a bend into the middle of the shield, which I was honestly really worried about since, I'd spent all day getting to this point, and it'd be the worst kind of pain trying to fix this, but with the shield finished with some little bolts and some paint, oh my god, it looks so good. I actually did make the groove too wide in the back, which doesn't matter because it didn't even stick right, but I can't bring myself to care, just look at it. Also, I know it's missing the insignia. Look, this already took all day, and the list says it's IRL-ish build, so really it shouldn't even have a video game logo on it in the first place. So, okay, look, I added a custom spider-themed Herald Dream post. Are you happy now? I made my own honage out of foam. The sheets I'm using weren't big enough to cut the whole thing out in one go, so I had to split it up. And while splitting it into the blade, the guard, and the pommel made sense, that also made gluing the panels together a fucking nightmare, since now I had to fit the piece together like a puzzle first. But with that done, I could clean up the rough edges and round over the round bits, which, while I'm on the subject, why is this the most comfortable handle so far? This is a Pokemon, it doesn't need to work well. Anyway, the big thing I actually wanted to focus on with this build was the paint. And yes, of course I'm making a shiny honedge. Red's my color. I mean, just look at this. Easily one of the best colors for a sword blade to be. Although, I may have underestimated just how much longer painting by hand is compared to spray paint and... Okay, look, I got most of the painting done, including the ribbon technically, so I'm counting it. I mean, look at him! Hell of a way to cap off the first week, because I'm not sure anything's gonna top this, no matter how well I make it. I made a Dawnguard hammer from Skyrim, mostly because I want to make at least one big smashy hammer. I actually used contact cement for this one instead of the spray adhesive I've been using, mostly because I ran out of spray adhesive. But it also let me get a lot more targeted when applying the glue to the edge that didn't work. Like at all, the glue simply did not hold, which was a bit of a problem because again, I didn't have any spray adhesive left. But before I gave up completely, I tried just letting it set for less time. It's an old can, maybe that would help. And surprisingly enough, it did. Not perfectly, but more than good enough. Then after finishing the hammerhead, I added on the little extra bits, the spike, the foot thing, and the sort of bulge in the handle. And with those in place, all I had to do was paint it, which was a lot more annoying than usual with the runes. But it looks awesome. Plus, it is absolutely big and smashy, so I could not be happier. I made Leo's blade from Guilty Gear, and why are all the weapons in this game so big? Seriously, I think this took the most foam so far, and I've already made Faust's scalpel, and I only used 2 layers of foam for this one. Listen, I'm making 30 of these things, I gotta save some materials where I can. But with the pieces cut out, I can glue them up, if I remembered to put glue on all the faces I needed. Whatever, this at least got me to bite the bullet and bring the contact cement downstairs so you get to see what that looks like for once. But with the panels done and support rod in, I can glue the whole thing up with a fresh, massive tub of contact cement. I told you, making these takes stuff and stuff takes money. You don't know what I'm sacrificing for a cool sword. It worked, kinda hit or miss. I mean, for one, it was a fucking disaster actually getting the glue onto the parts, but even after the glue up, it didn't seem great. But that's hopefully just a skill issue and it'll go away with practice. But with everything glued up, all that was left to do was bevel and paint it. And it looks pretty damn good. I'll be honest, this one was super fucking annoying, especially on 30 hours of awake. I almost gave up and racked up my first L, but nah, this one's a winner. I made a falchion out of foam. Finally, another normal sword. 3rd out of like 10 at this point. Really knowing the whole sword part of sword timber, huh? Anyway, with the smaller and simpler shape, cutting out and prepping the layers was a lot easier if I didn't fuck up and have to make an extra piece anyway. I made 2 blades with the stencil flipped, but only 1 handle, so the blade was gonna be all crooked. Doesn't matter, I fixed it before it was a real problem. And with the layers finished, including the support rod in the middle one, I could glue the whole thing up, clean up the details, and paint it. All silver spray paint job. Oh, how I've missed you. Do you have any idea how long painting by hand takes? It's fucking forever. But with that done, I'm officially a 1/3 of the way through this challenge, with no misses yet. I really thought this was gonna be harder, but so far this has been... Oop. I made a plasma pistol from 40k, and yes, getting the size right was a nightmare, how could you tell? But skipping over the fact that this stencil is barely not really technically usable, tracing and cutting out the foam wasn't too bad, except, oh wait! I had to keep mending bits that were wrong on the stencil, and I ended up having to cut the stencil like a 1/3 of the way through because I realized that the glue lines that would show was actually on most plasma pistols, and I needed to trace and cut out 10 pieces so far! Nice. Real nice. But with the 3 double thickness panels done, I went ahead and cleaned them up a bit before final glue up. Namely the plasma vent things with the Dremel and the heat vent holes in the barrel with my new hot knife. And I'll be honest, starting to see the limits of it and I'm not impressed. But it still worked technically best, so we move on to final glue up, which already makes it look sick. Then on to clean up, which I know makes it look a little bit naked right now, but that's why we add a bunch of gribbly little circle bitches that make it look super sick. Then I had, for the first time in 11 days, enough time to properly finish this weapon. With, for the first time, a hairdryer, which helps to close the foam structure and even up the surface, and I honestly had very low expectations of it, but it worked amazing. For sure doing this from now on. After that, I actually had enough time for plastic that I didn't record any of, oops, before moving on to painting. And since this is a full-size model of a 40K mini, let's treat this like a mini model, shall we? Starting off strong with 2 Warhammer Citadel paints for the gun body, Lead Belcher and Runefang Steel, both of which I dry brushed on to do something probably, I don't know. Then I had to move on to good paints for the white. That being Pro Acryl Bold Titanium White, an absolute magic paint, look how opaque it is on black, and Vallejo Andrea Blue for the Plasma Glow, which I tried to dry brush on to give it a nice gradient glow effect, but the white paint was still wet, so I had to just mash it on and try and smear it into a gradient instead, which worked! Plus some glow effect on the metal around the blue glowy shit, and it's done. And God, I could not be happier. Seriously, from the shape, to the details, to the glow, to the fucking metal sheen, I honestly think I'd get like 5% better with a week to make it, and I did it in one very, very long day. I 3D printed a Bollock Dagger, which is a real kind of knife that really does look like that, I promise. Partially because it'd be a nightmare to make in foam, a tapered cylinder for a handle, a really long, thin blade, 2 intersecting spheres for the guard, but also because it's a really easy 3D model to make. A slightly tapered cylinder, the world's lowest polygon cone, and a sphere with a mirror modifier on it. But I'm running a little bit low on resin, so let's just, yeah, there we go. Much better. But with Dinky here all modeled up, all I had to do was print it, and it would be done. After getting cleaned up in a vat of alcohol, and cured fully in a UV lights chamber, because the printer doesn't actually cure it all the way through. But after that, okay, look, I thought it was printing bigger, but I'm not gonna complain about Dinky being too small, okay? Especially when all I have left to do is paint the handle brown, the blade silver, with highlights on the edge to really make it fancy, and then brown again on the handle, because the paint I was using was aggressively cheap to call this thing done. I made the 9 Live Stealer from D&D out of foam, using the same different thickness construction that went so poorly with the Gladius, but since I don't know the definition of insanity, and this time I fully committed to the hybrid build construction, it worked out really well. And with final glue up done, all that was left were the details, which, because I wasn't done having bad ideas, involved a bag of tiny skulls. I cut them up to fit beads in their mouths before using epoxy glue them to the sword. There were good reasons I wanted to use epoxy, not least of which was to try out epoxy, but it turns out epoxy is made of hell! But I did eventually get it working, and after carving the texture into the guard because I didn't have time for anything else, I was going to let some epoxy get thick and then drape it over the skulls to try and blend it into the guard better, but the epoxy clearly wasn't done with me yet, so yeah. But even still, with some paint on it, doesn't look too bad to me. I made a rubber knife, which started by 3D modeling a mold of the knife, which was so much more annoying than it should have been, but I got it working and even got some registration keys in there. And with the model done, I was just a brisk 8-hour print away from the finished mold. Really hoping it comes out good because we really don't have the... Well, good thing printing one piece is so much faster than printing all 4. With the mold all glue up, thank you registration keys, I could mix up some 2-part silicone, pour it into the mold halves, and then wait for at least 2 hours for the silicone to harden to the point I could flip one half on top of the other without it all just sloshing out, which magically lined up almost instantly. Thank you, registration keys! Now, the silicone I used was old, and I think the enclosed space did something because the stuff in the cup was fine, but the knife turned out, a little bit undercooked. Could I have left it in longer? Yeah, but I'd misstream, and also this stupid shit. I mean, just look at it! The Bollock Dagger's got performance issues! Also, yes, making the number 1 a Bollock Dagger was 100% intentional. What's more fitting in silicone than something shaped like a dick? I made Pirate Spear from Ruby on recommendation of Space from the Discord. Cutting out and gluing up the foam wasn't too bad, but I tried making the barrel of the spear by just wrapping thin foam around some otherwise exposed sport rod. And while it worked and looked super good, it was so annoying. I'm talking wrap masking tape around the entire thing so tight it caused hand cramps halfway through just so the glue would hold annoying. But with everything finally glued up, including some extra details that are way better than I thought they'd be, I could paint it up and have myself a slightly more reasonable spear than Faust's scalpel. And no, I couldn't get the engraving done. That stuff's so thin it's barely visible in the show and would have taken a day by itself, so we're calling this done. Meaning this challenge is half finished, with still 0 misses. Hell yeah. I made Finn's Fin sword from Adventure Time as requested by Flaze Flame. After tracing out the foam, cutting out the foam, gluing the foam into full sword pieces, cutting a slot for the support that I definitely didn't make too long, gluing the panels with the rough sword shape, doing some rough shaping on the sword with the knife, and doing the final shaping on the sword with my new journal bits because my old one's fucking broke. I had just enough time to prime this with some Plastidip, and bought some white Plastidip so I wouldn't have to paint over most of the sword afterwards. But then I fell asleep before the final coat, so I had to paint the whole thing anyway. But over an hour and at least 6 gallons of white paint later, I could finish painting the sword, and God, it is amazing how important paint is, huh? I actually almost left the gem without the highlights because it looked good enough, but I'm so glad I didn't. It brings so much life to the sword. I made a staff of swarming insects for D&D, and I decided very early, since I was going to be using so many layers to get the right width and carving down to the right shape anyway, I might as well make the pieces really rough at the start. And doing this paid off big time, especially when cutting them out. I chewed through all of this in about half the time it took to do one of the head layers, but once I had all the pieces glued up into an absolute unit, I had to actually do that carving down. I started by taking big chunks off with the knife before finishing the shape with my Dremel, and with my desk clean, I had to find a way to make those gold plates. And I had an idea for that. Raise up just the edges and differentiate the plates with paint. And honestly, it worked really well. All I need now is a little paint, and it'd be time to add the bugs. That's right! This isn't a staff of swarming insects at all. It's a staff of swarming spiders. I deceived you, and none of you are allowed to be surprised about that. And yes, I'm still counting for insects, even though spiders are arachnids. The rules are mine to break! I made a mace out of foam. Started off by adding thickness to the support rod, which sucked, before adding even more to the handle, which sucked much less, and adding some accents to the handle. Then I cut the flanges. I'd love to say that this flange shape was designed, but no, I just chopped out a shape I thought looked pretty neat. And the head having 5 flanges is equally deep. 5 is my favorite number. But with the head all glued up, all I needed to do was attach it. I dry fit it beforehand to make sure it actually fit, and to find the depth I wanted it. Then the glue set at about half that depth, but it still looked good, so it's fine. Then, with a last-minute addition of this little ringing thing under the head to blend it better to the haft, I could hit it with some paint and it'd be done. And I'm really happy with how this turned out, especially given that I was able to both make this and do literally anything else in the same day. But I do really want to find a way to get rid of that foam texture, and that little smooth patch above the handle where I over-applied some glue gives me an idea. But that's for tomorrow. Wolfen asked me to make a Scotch Claymore, and while that would be cool, I decided to go for the very similar but much harder Flamberge. No, I don't know what's wrong with me. I was surprisingly able to get basically all the pieces out of one foam sheet, and after cutting them out and gluing it up, I just had to clean it up with the Dremel, paint it, and it'd be done. But I still have that plan to try out, don't I? You remember the plan from yesterday's short, link below, which has me adding more contact cement to the outside of the blade. Now, why would I do that? In theory, this should help eliminate that foam texture that's been on nearly every weapon I've made so far, but we'll only know how well it works with some paint and... oh yeah. Yeah, that's real good. Especially compared to the guard with no glue. Admittedly, it looks better on camera, but this is still a very successful experiment and a very cool sword. I made a Monster Hunter sword based on a Wiggler. This ended up being one of the chunkiest blades I've made yet, especially at 3 layers thick, but getting the foam cut out wasn't actually that big of a problem. Then, after having to relearn not to use too much contact cement, I could get to the important parts. First being final shaping, which was a nightmare for that big goofy head of a pommel, and then painting, using every last drop of silver spray paint I had left before finishing the handle with the Wiggler colors. Plus, of course, the button eyes and sewn mouth. I did originally plan to paint the whole sword Wiggler colors, and since tomorrow is Wiggler again, I might. But for now, this marks 2/3 of this challenge done. I made a Monster Hunter shield based on a Wiggler. It's bigger than this, don't worry. I just didn't feel the need to make a full stencil for a circle, so this is just so I have an easier time with the details. I then immediately made at least 2 different stencils for the eye, but my idea probably still stands. But with all the pieces traced up and cut out, I could glue it all together, head fin things included. Then all I needed was some paint, and oh my god, painting took so long. Like 3+ hours long, and I still think it needs more coats. Mostly due to these aggressively cheap paints I'm using, but still. Truly, nothing has made it clearer that a detailed paint job is a full-day commitment by itself. But in the end, I'm still very happy with how this turned out. Especially since, while this was drying, I had time to add a Wiggler decal to the blade from yesterday, properly completing my own Wiggler sword and shield. You're an inspiration, Joe Cat. It's good to have you back. I made a 40k Crozies out of foam, tracing and cutting out all the pieces with the head and the handle separate, which could have made cutting space for the support a bit of a challenge if I didn't decide to just measure it this time. I then glued up just the handle so that I have a much easier time carving into the right shape, a near perfect cylinder right up to where the head would have been in the way. Now, them being separate did make gluing the head on a lot more of a pain, but with that on, I could finish up the final shaping, which honestly came out better than I was expecting. And add the skull to the middle island I left uncarved, and the bands to the handle, which only left some Warhammer accurate Citadel paints before I had a finished Crozius. And while it might be a bit on the small side, it's still a new hitting stick, and I am very happy with this new stick to hit people with. I made the Sword of Temporal Justice out of foam, which I swear is a real sword, not to be confused with the Sword of Spiritual Justice or the Sword of Mercy, which outside of the name is somehow the most interesting. I made this one with the 2-thick blade and 3-thick handle construction that's quickly become my favorite, but in a super weird order, starting with the middle handle piece, then going directly to the blade, then going back to finish the rest of the handle, so that after the foam was cut out and glued up, I could get this cool gap in the guard, which in foam kind of just highlights how thick the blade is, but oh well. During final shaping, I left the bevel on one side sharp while rounding over the other side, just to see which one I liked more. Since with a blade that's both only 2 layers thick and so thin edge to edge, it's hard to get a good bevel without punching straight through the support rod. And with some paint, I honestly can barely tell the difference, but I think the crisper one is better. What I really learned is, holy shit, do I need to try the contact cement primer again, both for the looks and to hopefully not have the sanding foam take 50 times longer to paint. But that's for next time, since this sword is already done. I made a Dane axe out of foam, and no, it's not a 2-headed axe, it'll make sense in a second. Once I trace and cut the axe head, there. You getting it now? Ain't that slick? And with the axe attached, I was already almost done. During the final shaping, I tend to try the finer sanding bit on one side just to see how much better the finish is, and I am annoyed at how obviously correct that is. Not only because it more than doubles the sanding time, though that is annoying, but the bit isn't as wide as the coarse one, which makes it kind of impossible to sand big, flat sections like, oh, I don't know, this bevel. That's what the rough patches are from. But even though it took longer, I still had extra time for a layer of contact cement, and once it was painted, which the contact cement did make easier, thank God, yeah, this is just the correct way to finish a piece. If there wasn't a sharp edge between the flat of the blade and the bevel, I don't think you'd be able to tell which parts were sanded and which were factory. But I probably won't use this for most builds because it adds easily a couple hours to the build time, and that normally just doesn't fit into the 1-day limit. But it feels good to know that I could. I made Crescent Moon from Guilty Gear. The handle area was kind of annoying to cut out, but with the gun body glued up, I could start on the actual annoying part, the extras. The little bits I had to glue onto the main body, don't ask what happened to the trigger. And while gluing these on, I decided to just cover everything in contact cement now, so I wouldn't have to come back to do it later. Which is a problem, because I was planning on actually engraving the gun with my hot knife, but I don't really want to burn the already toxic fume-spewing contact cement. So instead I opted to just paint it, which actually isn't too much of a loss, because for reasons arcane and unknowable, I barely had time for that without engraving first. I really thought a paint job this rushed was going to be technically finished at best, but once it was done, yeah, it's already in need of a repaint and the first coat's not even dry yet, but it's not terrible. If I didn't have less than an hour to paint this, I think it'd be a totally fun cosplay piece. And it's more than good enough for this challenge. Cosmo asked me for a lightning sword, but I was immediately struck with the idea for a glaive instead. 2 for 2, sorry champ. Cutting out took surprisingly long. Turns out multiple separate straight lines, much slower than a couple long ones. And glue up barely worked on this larger dowel, but I got there in the end. I also added some extra foam to that cloud area under the blade. Yes, those were supposed to be clouds. No, it was not enough foam. But once it was cleaned up and primed, I could start painting it, which I went in on. Not with as much detail as Crescent Moon maybe, but this was all freehand, no reference. Plus edge highlighting, regular highlighting, and even some dry brushing to try to make this design as good as I could. And I think I did a damn good job. Like, this is exactly what I imagined when I started building. Hell, when I first added it to the list a month ago, this feels like redemption for what happened to my Rose design. And not a second too soon, since there are only 4 more builds before this challenge is done. Only 4 more before I can say I finished Sword Temper with 0 misses. Wish me luck. Serene asked me to make Meow Meow from Stardew from Terraria, and yes, this did take a lot of foam. So much foam! 5 sheets worth of foam! Cutting out so many pieces wasn't actually too hard, mostly because so many of them were big straight lines. To balance that out though, glue up was a nightmare! Everything that could go wrong did. Pieces bowing out, or bananaing, or failing to glue, or magically seeming smaller than the pieces below them. I even resorted to literally flipping my table over so I could lay it on top of the sword trying to hold it together while the glue set. And even that didn't work right! But once I finally had it together, I was able to pretty easily mow through the final shaping, which also didn't go perfectly. I accidentally dinged it with a Dremel, real mad about that, before using all the pink paint in the world on this thing. And with that done, Look, I know it's not perfect, but I don't care. This thing is so cool. I love everything about this. The only thing is that I wish I had more time to work on it. And with only 3 days left, I'll have time for that soon enough. I made a bow for Swordtember. Cutting out the pieces was probably the easiest bit all month, which was nice. And with the 6 near identical pieces ready, it turns out the glue can be just as nice if you learn to take your goddamn time. Who knew? I'm just happy my bow design works as well as I thought it would in foam. Hey, let me know if you'd watch me design weapons like this. That could be cool. Anyway, I've been priming this blade with cheap black paint because I ran out of spray cans, and honestly, this stuff works fantastic for that. Then I used an absolutely thrashed brush to add some uneven wood grain patterns in brown, and if I had a dark brown to use the base coat, not this one, doesn't count, it's tiny, the paint would be done and looking good. Highly recommend the thrashed brush method for wood. So I'm gonna say this paint is done too. It's just a really dark bow. Give it to your local stealth archer, they'll love it. Now I just need to string it up and boom! Not a functional bow, but a pretty damn cool one. Only 2 more days to go. I made a Staff of Power from D&D, and befitting a sick-ass wizard staff, I had a big brain plan for how to build it. I would cut out one side and glue the support to that as normal, but leave the other side as basically a big rectangle, so I would have a much easier time aligning the support rod on both sides, because I really wouldn't have to. I could just trim it to shape after it was glued. And this plan went absolutely terrible for like 5 seconds. Then it worked out pretty nice. And with the shape roughed in, I could finish the final shaping. Add on those little raised bits, you didn't think I forgot about those, did you? And engrave the text with my hot knife, which was made much easier by the text being runes, and much harder by me losing my hot knife for like 40 minutes. Then I just had to finish with a coat of contact cement and paint it with a touch of white, and exactly 1 spray can, and poof! Staff of Power, baby! The platonic ideal of what a very rare staff should be. And the 29th build finished out of 30. 1 more to go. For the last day of Swordtember, I made the Sword Reforged Andoril, as requested by Flazeflame. I was nervous about going for a 2-layer thick blade on something that was beveled to the middle. Nerves not improved when after attaching the first handle piece, I realized the grooves weren't actually lined up right, and seriously considered starting over with 3 blade layers. But I didn't. I finished gluing the blade in the handle with some slots cut out of the handle so it would fit onto the blade better. Very happy with how that came out. And after more than 2 hours of shaping, I am so glad I stuck with the thinner blade. This is the most refined sword I've made all month. All it needs now is a coat of contact cement, some raised bits on the handle, and some paint before this challenge is done. And what a way to go out, huh? I wish it had more detail, but that would require time that I just don't have in a 1-day challenge. But what I do have are plans for my Swordtember builds, this one included, and others I'm just as excited about. So stick around if you want to see what those plans are. They should be good. And thank you for coming on this journey with me. Now that's a lot of... Hang on, can you... Thank you. Now that's a lot of weapons. And this isn't even close to all of them. I mean, they're just the ones I could fit on the table. 30 shorts in 30 days. Hell of a project. But that choice of language, plus the fact that this project is a little bit past due for a full video, might be setting off alarm bells for you. And for good reason. See through the genius editing might of not flipping things over. That's right, I deceived you! Welcome to how the content creation sausage is made. Some of these just didn't fit the time frame, right? Now, a lot of them are done. The Gladius, Rose, Maroon's Razor, Faust's Scalpel, the Executioner's Sword, the Falchion, my beloved Plasma Pistol, the 3D printed Dinky, Rubber Dick Knife, the Mace, the beautiful Flamberge, Sword of Temporal Justice, Dane Axe, Lightning Glaive, Staff of Power, and the final build, Andoril, are all finished. They didn't need any work, which makes the final, actual build completed list look a little bit more like this, but I'm still counting by the shore, and most of them didn't need much more anyway. Iris Spear, the Fin Sword, the Wiggler Sword, Crescent Moon, and the bow only needed a bit of paint, and the rest were nearly finished too. The Knight Shield only needed some straps to hold it onto my arm. Hone Edge just needed the ribbon and way more paint than the other builds, which bordered on complete repaint, so I didn't want to use that much good paint, but it worked. The Dawnguard Hammer only needed a little repair, the metal strap thing, and the runes that were so annoying to try and get matching. The Wiggler Shield only needed straps like the Knight Shield, and also a complete repaint, which I tried really hard to avoid, but while annoying, went way better than I was worried about. The Crozies just needed the feathers on one side carved in, the skull glued on, and some paint. I opted for no black lines this time, since I think it might look better that way. You tell me. And on Meowmere, I replaced the rushed real bow with a debatably better fake one, and then used so much paint to finish it off. Like, I even ended up repainting the side that already had paint, and I am so happy I did. I mean, just look at the difference. And since none of those really count, they were so close to finish anyways, all that's left are the big ones. The 9 Lives Stealer and the Staff of Swarming Spiders. Starting with the 9 Lives Stealer, I really needed to do something about the guard. Not just decide I didn't carve, the whole thing just needed fixing. So after gluing on the rest of the skulls and adding a handle wrap, I went at it with some clay foam, which stuck to my hands horribly for a bit before I figured out how to get it on cleanly. Only to realize it looked better smeared on rough. So after a lot of very sticky sculpting, I was able to let it sit and harden for 2 days. Now you understand why I did not go with this for the 1-day build, but once it had hardened, I could paint it. Which, since it was mostly black spray paint with a little bit of silver and a teeny tiny bit of red, wasn't too hard. And from being one of the most unfinished and disappointing pieces, this is now maybe one of my favorites. Which only left the Staff of Swarming Spiders. For you at least, I actually did these 2 first. 3, guess on what the problem with it is. Hint, there's only 1 fucking spider on it right now. Not for lack of trying day of, but the ones I printed then shattered like fucking glass. So after spending 2 hours cutting out and gluing on the new medium but still very tiny spiders, plus some extra time making the big spider less pokey, I decided that was good enough without the really tiny spiders and moved on to painting it. Which the legs still did not make easy, but it came out good. It even feels good to hold and wave around like an idiot. But with that, I have completed 30 weapons in just a little over 30 days. You know, I had planned to have this video done within 3 days, not over 30. And I'm not even sure that would have been impossible. It just turns out that going from a rigid, everyday, planned, month-long schedule to a loosey-goosey, get some of that stuff done as soon as you can, is the motivational burnout equivalent to fucking money shifting. But this project still did everything I wanted it to, including giving me some great practice making prop weapons. And I am happy to announce I actually made some extra content of me going into what I learned on each and every build, more behind the scenes extra besides that, and upgrade stencils for every build I made on my new Patreon. That's right, you can now officially help me keep the lights on. And along with all the extra content, stencils, and my conditionally unconditional love, you can get weekly updates on what I'm up to and where the hell my videos are, early ad-free access to videos, and for $1 you can get your name in videos and streams to prove you have the highest form of small channel bragging rights. This is all very new to me, so things will almost certainly shift over time, so if $1 bragging right sounds good to you, well, that one's probably not going to go anywhere for a while unless I really blow up, but still, feel the FOMO, feel the fear of missing out, send me your dollars. Is it weird that the excessive shilling feels less bad than the standard shilling? I don't know, like I said, I'm very new to this. But I think that's everything now. Do all the YouTube things, ring the subscribe button, smash the comments, etc, etc. Oh, I stream most days of the week now, come say hi. And the Crisis in D&D video that was meant to come out like 4 videos ago at this point is coming, I promise. Specific updates are on, you know where. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and bye-bye. Thank you all for watching. I'm doing less of these next year. Bye-bye.